Welcome to Nomad Media Automotive Tales, where we tell vehicle stories, a little bit of history, and some unique personal experiences. Let's get right into it. So for today, we have Jerry Hall and his 1970 Plymouth Superbird. Man, this car is amazing. I know when I saw it down at Wellborn's, it's definitely an eye catcher. You don't see Superbirds every day, and it's absolutely immaculate too, which is it's wild. Like I love seeing these things, you know, and some of the history on it, you know, it just blows my mind. Like I know Richard Petty, he left Plymouth because they wouldn't do like a wing car for him to race in NASCAR. But then they designed the Superbird just for him, for my understanding, you know, hopefully that's right. But this thing, I think you've owned it for a little time now. I'm sure you have some stories with it. How about you tell me a few of these stories on it?
Well, I've owned the car for almost 24 years. I bought it in April of 2000 from the original owner. You know, I was looking for a Superbird, and I had found one in Fargo, North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my brothers about it. I said, I think I'm going to buy a plane ticket, go out and look at this car. And everything, I said, it's in my price range and stuff. And I said, if I buy it, the guy's going to have to tear down the back of his basement to drive it out. I said, the car's been in there for 20-something years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left that with my two brothers, and next afternoon my youngest brother called and he says, there's a Superbird over in Prattville in the Cooters Pond area. He said, and I told him, I said, well, I thought I knew where every Superbird within 50 miles, or every Mopar within 50 miles of here was,
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And I said, I've been to see most of them. I said, I've never heard of this car. So the next afternoon, I finished work just a little bit early. I said, I'm going to drive over that way and see if I can find this car. So I drive over, find the directions to Cooters Pond.
Mm-hmm.
I go up in actually this subdivision was called Scenic Hills. I drive into Scenic Hills, go up the first street that I come to. I get to the top and I see the basis of something orange from there down, and some rally wheels, but it looks like a station wagon. And he had a tarp over it, pulled tight to the rear wing, and bricks sitting on top of the rear wing. And so I pulled up in this driveway, didn't know the guy from Adam and everything, and knocked on the door, and he came to the door, and I says, introduced myself. I said, I'm Jerry Hall. I said, that wouldn't happen to be a Superbird back there, would it? He said it would. And I didn't ask if it was for sale, what the story was or anything. I said, you mind if we look at it? So he said no. He got his hat, and we walked out to where the car was at and everything, and I helped him uncover it, all like that, and he was telling me all about the car and this, that, and the other, and he says, it runs and drives and everything. He said, I just hadn't got a battery in it and all sorts of stuff and all like that. And I said, well, it looks nice and everything. I looked at everything. I said, it's going to need some work. He said, oh yeah. He said, I know. He says, I lost my storage. He says, the car's sitting out here in the weather and it's deteriorating and stuff like that. He said, I need to find a better place to keep it. So I helped him cover it back up and everything, and we walked him back up toward his house, and I said, that car wouldn't possibly be for sale, would it?
Mhm.
He said, well, he says, I don't want to sell it. He said, but he said, unless I can find something real quick, he said, I'm afraid I'm going to have to. I said, well, what would you want for it? He threw a number out there, you know, which wasn't unreasonable at all. And everything, what the car was, because the car I was going to look at was priced in the same price range.
Mhm.
So, being the guy I am, you know, you always try to get things cheaper.
Of course.
I said, why so much? He said, well, this car is tied to my retirement. He said, so if I sell it, he said, a third of that money is going to the government. And all, I said, well, I said, that's good. I said, I can fully understand that. So he went on toward the house, and I said, well, I said, if you sell the car, I said, what you gonna buy with what you get? He said, I'm gonna buy a new Dodge truck. And I said, just what kind of new Dodge truck you gonna buy? He said, I always said, I think I want one of those V10s.
One of those Viper trucks.
No, he was talking about the truck V10.
Okay.
And he wasn't talking about a Viper truck, because that was long before they ever came out.
Okay.
That was in 1990, and the first Viper truck was
Right.
94, 95, something like that.
Okay.
No, was it 2004 or 5? I'm not sure.
That sounds right. I'll look it up later and see.
But anyway, I looked at it, and it started the wheels turning and stuff like that, and that night when I got home, I went on the internet at the house and everything, and looked around and about taxes and stuff like that. And I found out in the state of Alabama that if you trade merchandise for merchandise, there's no tax liability. So I called him up the next day, and I said, I found out something that's sort of fascinating and everything. I said, it may just interest you. I said, I found out that if you trade merchandise for merchandise, there's no tax liability. I said, so I guess a new Dodge truck could be tied to your retirement too. He said, well, I hadn't thought about that. I said, well, I'm not saying it's so. I said, I need you to do your part and see. I said, but if you can see your way, I said, we might be able to make a deal. So he called me back a day or so later, and he said, I think you're right. He said, I talked to folks that do my taxes and this, that, and the other and everything, and he says, they said they saw no problem with it. I said, okay. I said, now, we just need to figure out what kind of Dodge truck you want. He said, well, you drove up in a Dodge truck? He said, I want one sort of like that. I says, well, mine's a diesel. He said, oh, no, I don't want a diesel. I said, well, you mentioned V10. I said, you ready for the 8 to 10 miles to the gallon that one's going to get as an everyday driver? He says, no, I ain't quite ready for that. I said, well, I said, there's other engines available. I said, I'm going to go to the Chrysler place and look up, see what Dodge trucks cost and this, that, and the other. And I said, I'm going to get a few estimates on what it would cost and everything. So I went the next day. I went up to Tallahassee, to the Chrysler Plymouth Dodge place up there, and I talked with the sales manager up there, and we sketched out 3 trucks, different options, this thing. But all of them came up into a price range of $25,000, $26,000. So I took those 3 sheets of paper that he printed out. None of those trucks were built or available anywhere. They would have to be built. And also I went over to his place and we sat down and we looked at the options on this, and he said, well, I like this and don't like this. He said, but I like this over here. And he picked and chose, so I made a list of what he liked and what he didn't like, and he finally decided that he would go with a 360 engine, which I hated to tell him, wasn't going to get much better gas mileage than the V10, but
Yeah.
he he made the decision and everything. So I went back and I got a printout of that particular truck with everything on it that he wanted, nothing on it that he didn't want, the color that he wanted, the interior that he wanted, and everything.
Yeah.
I took it back over there. He sat down and looked at it, and he says, sounds like a deal to me. He says, what we're going to have to do? I said, money has to exchange hands to buy or sell something. I said, I can't just swap you a Dodge truck. I said, what about $1 and a new Dodge truck? I said, per these specifications right here. He says, well, that's good for me. I said, you told me the car ran and drove. I said, I hadn't heard it crank, do anything. I said, but on your word, I said, I'll go order that truck. I said, I'll order the truck. I said, when the truck comes in, you drive the car to my place. I said, we'll exchange the $1 and we'll go pick up your new truck. He said, that's the deal. So that's what happened. The truck took about 5 weeks to build. It arrived at Ben Atkinson and Tallahassee up there, everything, and I called him. I said, your truck's in. I said, when do you want to go get it? He said, well, what about I come over there tomorrow morning? I said, okay. I said, I'll be waiting. So I have a picture on this poster back over here,
I'll show those.
and of him where he drove up with the car, and then I have a picture of him with his new Dodge truck.
That's absolutely amazing, man. Like, I don't think when I met you, I don't think I actually looked at your storyboard. I tend to glance over them real quick whenever I see them if I don't take a picture of them. And I had not heard that story until you told it here today. And that is just amazing because, like, for someone like me, like younger, obviously, I wasn't driving in the early 2000s, late 90s, and I can't imagine somebody doing a deal like that these days because internet. Like, I feel like everybody knows what these cars go for now, and I couldn't imagine it. But it's just amazing to know that that's how you came across this car for $1.
Yeah.
I mean, you bought it for $1, so
Right, and a new Dodge truck, which was just shy of 26,000.
you bought it for $1.
Yeah.
You bought it for $1, man. Like, but you told me another story about this car that's involving you and a car show and some of your friends about some shade tree mechanic-tree. You mind telling that story to everybody?
No problem. We finished the car in '04. I took it to the Mopar Nationals in '05, and I believe in '06 I was invited to a car show in Pensacola, Florida. We loaded the car up in the trailer and drove it to a friend's house down there, unloaded the car and drove it about 8 to 10, 12 miles to the show, which was in a nice park, lots of shade trees and this, that, and the other. So we got there and set the car up. I have several little items in here, have a Roadrunner bird and some other paraphernalia that
Had
you
to have your show goodies.
drape over the car and this, that, and the other. And everybody started coming around looking, asking questions. And this one fella came up and he says, I'm thinking about having a car built. He says, I need to know who built this car. I said, well, two buddies of mine and I built this car. Oh no, this car wasn't done by just anybody. You need to tell me who built this car. And he kept on. He must have asked that question 15 times while he was walking around looking at the car. And finally he went about his way. And I'm sitting under this nice shade tree, looking at all the shade trees and thinking about how to tell this fella that me and my two buddies actually built this car.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, my name's Jerry. Got a buddy named James who helped me with the car, and a buddy named Johnny that turned a lot of wrenches on the car and everything. And I thought j-j-&j. And I came up with j-j-&j Shade Tree Restoration. So he came back over later and he asked again, he says, you gonna tell me who built this car? I said, yeah. I said, sure, I'll tell you. I said, j-j-&j Shade Tree Restoration. Well, naturally, he thought I was messing with him. But I was telling him the truth. You know, every nut and bolt that's been turned on this has been turned by one of the three of us.
And man, that's amazing too, because like I know a lot of parts on this car are hard to come by. Like the nose cone is impossible for the most part, right? Like something around there, and you've had to. I don't know what condition you bought it in. Hopefully, you'll have some pictures of that you can share with me. But
oh yeah,
the you know, just thinking about what has to go into a restoration, it's unreal. Which, hey, you said 1999 is when you got it?
1990.
90. Okay, early 90s and restoration.
April, I think it was April of 90.
And you had your restoration through 2005?
I finished the restoration in, let's see. No, I bought the car in April of 2000.
2000.
And we finished the car in 2004.
Okay, 2004. 4-year restoration here, where I can only imagine you had to touch everything on this car, and it shows. It's a beautiful car. Like, I understand show cars, and I'm like, this is a definitive show car. Like,
well, I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. It's an old car. There's still some faults, but nothing obvious.
Well, the faults in my book are part of the charm of owning an old car, because you have to be one with the car. Like, you have to know your car to know what's wrong with it, you know. And me, I'm cut from a different cloth. If I owned a show car, it wouldn't be a show car for long. I would drive it too much, but you know, it's a beautiful car though.
Well, when you saw the car for the first time, it was driven to that show.
And that's quite a ways.
It's from here it's 35 to 40 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I'm on back roads and stuff like that, I'm not objectionable to driving the car most anywhere. It's when it gets into heavy traffic and all like that that I fear more for the car than I do for myself. So, it's there's non-replaceable items on this car that you just can't get to.
Yeah, you just can't find them anymore. Like I mentioned earlier, the nose cone.
Yeah.
Just impossible to find them.
So the car's not perfect. There's a few little things weren't done, but they weren't done on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is the wing on the car is got a slight tilt on one side and it's dead level on the other side. That's the way it came from the factory. I documented it with pictures, stuff like that. When we put the wing back on the car after paint and stuff like that, we left it like that. Also, the trunk lid didn't fit down completely on the right-hand side of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner told me that that was the way it was from the factory. So we chose not to correct that. It's still just like that today. So other than that, basically everything has been rebuilt, refurbished, or redone.
Man, what a story on this thing, man.
You know, the one thing that wasn't touched was the vinyl top.
Mm-hmm.
The owner said that it was the original vinyl top that came on the car, which I'm finding hard to believe.
Yeah.
But I left it. It was in sad shape when I got it, but with about 8 or 10 or 12 different compounds and this, that, and the other, and cleaning a square inch at a time, I cleaned it up where it's presentable.
It's definitely presentable. Like, man, I would have never known.
And all. So, and the interior that's in the car, he said he put the interior in the car. It was the last NOS set of upholstery left at Chrysler. So recently I had some foam coming up under the driver's seat
Mm-hmm.
and everything, which means the foam was and burlap was deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
So I took it to a guy over in Georgia that does upholstery work.
Mm-hmm.
He took these seat covers off. He replaced the foam, went with a new material that's not burlap, which serves the same purpose
Mm-hmm.
and everything, and redid the seat, so I won't have any issues of it in the near future.
Very nice, very nice.
And one cool thing when we took the dash apart, the original owner had sent all the dash pieces off to have those plastic pieces plastic re-chromed.
Okay.
And we took the dash apart because I wanted to redo the cluster and
Mm-hmm.
which hadn't been restored, and the clock wasn't working, various things. So I sent the cluster out to California to Redline Gauges
Okay.
for a rebuild. None of the chrome pieces on the dash had the black painted on them.
Okay.
And above the glove box there's a piece that was solid chrome that needed paint and detail, and when we removed it, on the back there was a piece of masking tape. And on the back of that piece of masking tape it says, "This is some slick shit." And
Oh, that's
it's
good.
still on there. We put it back with it on there.
Hey, that's perfect, man. Like, that's great. And you say that's on the back of the glove box?
It's on the back of the piece above the glove box. It's a plastic piece
Wow.
that was vacuum chromed
Mhm.
originally, and then it was paint detailed so that there's not much chrome showing, but that's the way they did it back then.
That's amazing. The stuff you find in old cars when
Yep.
people are working on them and things like that, especially, I can only imagine when that piece of tape probably got put in there.
It was sometime in his ownership when he did what he called a restoration on the car, which amounted to some paint work and attempt to repair some rust here and there, and all, which wasn't faring well with the weather that it was in at the time I bought it. So it's But I've got a picture album that usually is displayed with the car that shows how the car was found, all the problem areas,
Yeah.
you know, and everything. The price of the car, you might think $1 in a new Dodge truck is mighty cheap, but the money that was spent on this car to bring it back to this was astronomical.
I can only imagine. I can't wait to see them pictures. But Jerry, I tell you, how about we move on to getting to hear this car running?
Okay,
Yep.
it's not running its best right now. We had a problem a few weeks ago, but she
You
does
know
crank
what?
and run.
Before we get to that, how about you tell about that drive if you're okay with it?
I'm fine with that drive. A buddy of mine invited me to a car show in Troy, Alabama, which from here, round trip is about 150, 160 miles.
Yep.
And it's well within the range of the car if I don't show out and kick the 4-valve down too much and this, that, and the other. So I meet him at his house in Montgomery, and we head to Troy. And we cruising along, we make it down there fine, go through the finer parts of Troy trying to find where this show's at, and we get there. And I have a couple of trophies because this car won Best Mopar, and that also won Best in Show that day.
That's awesome.
So on the way back, we're coming back, and we're about 3/4 of the way back, and my car sputters.
Uh-oh.
And I says, It felt really like a vapor lock. But I noticed that my buddy in front of me, his car, he had slowed down about 20 miles an hour. So I just stayed behind him and babied mine along, and he finally pulled off and when his quit. And he relayed his experience about what happened. He says, I was driving along just fine. He said, my car sputtered, and he said, it caught back up, it sputtered again, it kept sputtering, and everything. And he said, finally, he said, here I am side the road. And I said, well, about the time you had that experience, I said, I'm having the same problem. I said, mine just ain't quit yet.
Yeah.
And also, we pull off, and he tries to get his started, and I try to get mine started. Well, neither one of us could get our cars started. So he called his wife, who was ready with a truck and trailer to come get him, and she's on her way. I get mine cranked up enough to pull it over in a safe spot in the median and everything, so that we didn't get run over.
Right.
You know, because 231's sort of an active highway down through there. It's 4-lane, and you know, speed limit 65, but everybody runs 75 and 85.
Yeah.
We were probably the slowest cars on the trip down there and back, because you know, both of these cars turn a lot of RPMs at those speeds and stuff. So we were cooling about 65 maximum and everything, and watching everybody pass us. And you know, didn't have anybody that wanted to try us. They just kept right on going.
Bunch of thumbs up,
Yeah.
waving.
Right. So anyway, he gets there. His wife gets there with the truck and trailer. We get his car loaded up on the trailer, and he says, "Well, I'll send." He said, "As soon as I get my car unloaded," he said, "I'll be back for yours." I said, "Nah, if mine will crank," I said, "I'm going to try to follow you." So they took out. I went over and got mine. It cranked right up, but I could still tell it wasn't running right. But I was able to coax it up to 55 or 60, and they pulled off at their turnoff to go to their house, and they asked me, says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to try to make it in." So I pulled up here, swung in to back the car into the building here, and it quit. And that's, we first thought fuel filter, and I had one on the shelf to replace it with. Then I'd used my last replacement fuel pump some months back, so it took almost 3 weeks to get the right fuel pump. We got a fuel pump in. Car fired right up and everything, good fuel pressure and everything like that, but apparently we've got some kind of trash in the carburetor, and the float on the driver's side is trying to stick a little bit. So right now we've got it adjusted out where it'll run, but the carburetor's going to have to come off and go to the shop.
Well, the reason why I wanted to see if you'd tell that story, if you're willing to, people need to understand, even the nicest of show cars, when they're old cars, they've got their quirks. This is just part of it, and it's, you address the problems when they come up and you keep on trucking.
Well, as of right now, it's never let me down.
Yeah. Hey, you made it home, so it still hasn't. Like
even though we had to push it into the building here,
even though it home just outside, still made it back.
Yep.
But man, thanks for telling that. And with that, how about we actually get into hearing this car run? And anybody out there, don't be judging on if it's sputtering or anything like that, but just be happy it runs so you can hear it.
All right.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Jerry Hall's 1970 Plymouth Superbird. Man, this car is amazing. I'm glad that I got the opportunity to interview you on it. Like, your story about how you obtained this car with $1, and I'm going to maintain that $1 is what you bought this for, plus a truck. But that story is amazing, and it's just something I would have never imagined when I met you. But especially since I overlooked your storyboard altogether. But I want to thank you again for having me out here. Like, I greatly appreciate it and giving me some of your time. Is there anything you would like to say to anyone that might be watching?
No, I think you got it covered.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. And with that, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.
At the next car show, okay?
And there you have it, guys. Be sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.